The sun was just dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across Steven Seagal's sprawling estate. Birds chirped, the occasional dog barked, and everything looked calm, almost too calm. But peace was about to be shattered in a way no one inside the gates could have expected. Officer Derek slammed his squad car to a stop in front of the mansion, red and blue lights flashing violently. He jumped out, hand on his holster, chest puffed with authority, and eyes scanning for danger. He believed the world was neatly divided, the people he respected, and everyone else. And he had already decided that the man walking toward the front door, jeans slightly faded, a simple jacket over a t-shirt, belonged to the second category. "Freeze!" Derek barked, pointing at Steven. "Hands behind your back." Steven paused mid-step, groceries in hand, and slowly turned, calm, collected. He looked at the officer with quiet disbelief, but without fear. "Officer," he said evenly, "this is my home." Derek sneered, his pride refusing to acknowledge the truth. "Don't lie to me. People like you don't live in houses like this. Step aside, or I'll make you." A few neighbors, drawn by the flashing lights, peeked through fences and windows. Whispers began to ripple. "Isn't that Steven Seagal?" But the cop ignored them. He didn't care about names, fame, or proof. In his mind, he had already judged, and judgment meant action. Steven, still holding the grocery bag in one hand, simply said, "Check the address if you don't believe me." Derek's pride and arrogance boiled over. He didn't check. He didn't listen. Without warning, he grabbed Steven's arm and yanked him toward the hood of his own car, handcuffs dangling in the other hand. "Step out of the car! Don't make me repeat myself!" he shouted. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The air was thick with tension. The neighbors stared, some pulling out their phones, already recording. Steven didn't struggle. He didn't shout. He only looked at the officer with a faint, knowing smile, the kind of smile that says, "You have no idea who you're messing with." And that's when the officer made the first of many mistakes that would cost him dearly. He had just arrested one of the most famous, disciplined, and calm action stars in the world, at his own home. Little did Derek know, this moment of arrogance was about to turn into a legal nightmare that would cost him millions, all because he let bias and ego dictate his actions. The neighborhood was unusually quiet for a Friday evening, and yet the flashing red and blue lights of Officer Derek's squad car had drawn attention from every nearby window. Families peeked through blinds, teenagers stopped mid-game on the street, and a few curious neighbors had even stepped out onto their porches, smartphones in hand, ready to capture what they assumed would be some minor drama. But nobody expected what was about to unfold. Steven Seagal, calm as a lake at dawn, stood on the driveway, his groceries in one hand, keys in the other. He didn't struggle. He didn't panic. He only watched as the officer, chest puffed and ego unchecked, barked orders that made no sense. "Hands behind your back," Derek repeated, voice louder, trying to assert authority. Steven shook his head slowly. "Officer, this is my home. You are on private property. Please check the address." Derek sneered. "Don't play games with me. People like you don't belong here. Step aside before I make you." A few neighbors whispered among themselves, "Isn't that Steven Seagal?" "Yeah. That's him, the actor." I think he's trying to tell the guy something." But Derek wasn't listening. He believed he had the right to act, to judge, to enforce justice as he saw fit. His bias blinded him completely, and that arrogance was about to cost him dearly. Steven didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. His calmness only seemed to frustrate Derek more. The officer took another step forward, hand hovering over his holster, handcuffs clinking like a warning. "Step aside. Now," he barked. "I just want to go inside," Steven said evenly. "I'm tired from work, and I need to put these groceries away." The officer's pride couldn't handle the truth. He grabbed Steven by the arm, yanking him toward the hood of his own car. "You think I care what you want? Don't make me repeat myself." Steven allowed it. He didn't resist. Not because he was afraid, far from it. He knew that true strength didn't come from reacting with anger. It came from maintaining control. His calm, collected demeanor only enraged Derek further. Meanwhile, the neighbors had begun recording. Phones raised, cameras pointed, whispers spreading like wildfire. "That's actually him. Are you kidding me? The actor? Is this legal? Can a cop even do this?" The commotion attracted a few more officers responding to a possible trespassing call. When they arrived, they hesitated. Something in the air told them this wasn't an ordinary situation. One of them even tried to intervene gently. Sir, are you sure this is?" Derek cut him off. "Don't question me. I know what I'm doing." Steven finally spoke again, in the same calm tone that had unnerved so many in his long career. "Officer, I understand your concern, but you're on private property, and this is my home. I don't wish to escalate this, but you are in the wrong." Derek's face turned red with anger. He didn't want reasoning. He wanted compliance. So he doubled down, pushing Steven's arm behind his back and snapping the handcuffs. "Now you're under arrest for trespassing," he shouted. The neighbors gasped. Phones started recording more aggressively. One brave neighbor stepped closer. "Wait, he lives here. That's his house." Derek waved him off. "Stay out of this." Steven's calm smile never wavered. He knew the officer's arrogance, his prejudice, and his lack of judgment were creating a ticking time bomb. And Steven Seagal was a man who knew how to let mistakes unfold naturally, without unnecessary force. Moments later, a sleek black SUV appeared at the end of the driveway. The new arrival caused a stir. 2 more security personnel, recognizing the situation, rushed toward the scene. The atmosphere shifted subtly but unmistakably. The power dynamics in the driveway were about to change, and Derek had no idea it was coming. The officer, however, remained oblivious. His bias had made him blind, deaf, and overconfident. As he held Steven against the car, ready to march him toward the squad, the calm and methodical Seagal simply looked at him. No anger, no aggression, just a faint, knowing smile. That smile alone spoke volumes. It told Derek, "You have no idea who you're messing with." And indeed, he didn't. Not yet. By now, the neighbors were fully aware, phones recording every second. Some whispered warnings, some tried to intervene, but Derek waved them all off. His ego would not allow him to consider the truth. And in that arrogance, he was about to make a mistake worth millions. Because in moments like these, when bias meets power, the truth has a way of coming out painfully and publicly. The handcuffs clicked shut, a metallic echo that seemed far louder than it should in the quiet suburban street. Officer Derek tightened his grip on Steven Seagal's arm, confident that he was in control. But confidence, as it often does, can be dangerously deceptive. Steven didn't resist, didn't shout, and didn't panic. He simply looked at the officer with a calm, piercing gaze that made it clear. He knew exactly what was happening, and he knew exactly how it would end. "Hands behind your back. Step toward the car," Derek barked, his voice almost trembling with suppressed anger. The neighbors, now fully awake to the unfolding drama, murmured among themselves. Phones were out, cameras recording. Whispers filled the air. "That's Steven Seagal. He's actually Steven Seagal. No way. The cop doesn't even know. Is he really arresting him at his own home?" Derek's ears were deaf to the murmurs. All he could see was the man in front of him in his mind, a trespasser, a threat, someone beneath him. His bias had convinced him of righteousness. The world was black and white, and he was the arbiter of justice. Steven's calmness only enraged him further. "I said move, now," Derek shouted, pushing harder against Steven's arm. Steven didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Officer," he said quietly, almost conversationally, "you are making a mistake." Derek froze for a split second, enough for Steven to slip a small, almost imperceptible motion, shifting his weight. It was subtle, but it made Derek stumble slightly. The officer's pride flared. How dare he stand there calmly? "Don't talk to me," Derek snapped. "I'm doing my job." Meanwhile, a small crowd had formed at the edges of the street. Neighbors peeked from their yards and windows, some shouting warnings, some recording for posterity. One brave man stepped forward. "Officer, that's his house. He's telling you the truth." Derek waved him off aggressively. "Stay back. This doesn't concern you." The tension in the air was almost tangible. The officer had taken control, but only in his own mind. Every action he took now was a misstep, every command fueled by arrogance rather than reason. Steven remained silent, his calm like a mirror, reflecting Derek's insecurity back at him. Then, just as Derek started to guide him toward the squad car, the unmistakable sound of an engine broke through the quiet. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the driveway, stopping abruptly. 2 more men stepped out, official-looking, with an air of authority that immediately shifted the energy on the street. Derek's eyes flicked toward the SUV, but he didn't register the danger yet. His bias made him dismiss the obvious that something bigger, someone more powerful, was now present. One of the men approached, clearly in command. "Officer Derek," he said firmly. "Step away. Immediately." Derek's ego bristled. "Sir, this man is under arrest for trespassing." The newcomer raised a hand. "You are on private property. You have no authority here, and you have just committed unlawful detainment." Steven, still calm, finally spoke. "Officer, everything he's saying is true. You are making a serious mistake. You should step back now." The officer's face turned red. Anger, disbelief, fear all collided at once. He glanced around. Phones were recording. Neighbors were staring. The weight of his actions began to press on him, but his pride refused to let him admit wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the 2 officials opened a folder, revealing documents proof of Steven Seagal's ownership of the property, security contracts, and legal authority. Derek froze, his bravado crumbling. Every misjudgment, every biased assumption, every arrogant move suddenly came into sharp, unforgiving focus. A tense silence filled the street. Derek looked at Steven, handcuffs dangling loosely in his hands now, and realized he had just arrested the owner of the home he was trying to police. The reality hit him like a sledgehammer. This was no ordinary arrest, no simple misunderstanding. This was a catastrophic mistake that would cost him dearly. Steven's smile remained faint, almost imperceptible. He didn't shout or gloat. He didn't need to. The truth was unfolding perfectly on its own. Derek had walked straight into his own disaster, blinded by prejudice and ego. The neighbors whispered in awe. He stayed calm the whole time. Yeah, he didn't even struggle. And now look at the cop. He has no clue what's coming. Steven's eyes met Derek's one final time. No anger, no malice, just a quiet certainty that the officer would soon face consequences far greater than embarrassment. And in that moment, it became painfully clear. Arrogance, bias, and disrespect don't just fail, they backfire spectacularly. The air around the driveway seemed to thrum with tension, thick enough to be felt in the lungs of everyone present. Officer Derek stood frozen, his ego crumpled, eyes darting between the official documents in the folder and the man he had just handcuffed. Steven Seagal remained calm, a faint, knowing smile curling at the corner of his lips. The neighbors' phones were raised, capturing every second of the unfolding drama, a scene that would soon spread far beyond this quiet suburban street. Derek's mind raced. How did I not realize? How could I make such a colossal mistake? He swallowed hard, his authority evaporating in the face of undeniable proof. Every whispered warning from neighbors now rang in his ears. The reality was settling in, slow and merciless. He had just arrested the owner of the mansion. His actions were not only wrong, they were illegal. A young neighbor, barely 16, spoke up, voice trembling with excitement and fear. "Officer, he's telling the truth. That's his house. You can't do that." Derek waved the kid off, trying to reclaim control. But it was too late. The street had shifted, the power dynamic had completely flipped. He had thought he was in charge, but now every camera, every witness, every passerby documented his failure in real time. Meanwhile, Steven finally addressed the assembled crowd, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made every ear perk up. "Sometimes," he said softly, "we let arrogance and bias guide our actions. And sometimes, that arrogance teaches us lessons the hard way." The officials stepped closer. "Officer Derek," one said, his tone sharp, "you have committed unlawful detainment, harassment, and discrimination. You are on notice. Any further resistance will be recorded as additional evidence against you." Derek's hand shook as he loosened the handcuffs, realizing fully that he had no way out of this situation. He had acted on assumptions, on prejudice, on the false authority of a badge, and it had all led to this humiliating moment. Neighbors whispered among themselves, some nervously, some excitedly. "Did you see how calm he stayed? That's Steven Seagal for you. He never loses control. And that cop? Wow. That's going to cost him big." In the driveway, the tension lingered, palpable. Steven didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. His calm presence made Derek's erratic energy even more apparent. It was a stark contrast. one man's composure against another man's arrogance unraveling in real time. The officials began documenting the incident, noting down statements from witnesses and neighbors. Every phone camera, every recorded moment, every whispered account contributed to a mountain of evidence that would soon be used against Derek. He realized, belatedly, that his ego had blinded him completely, and now the consequences were inevitable. As the black SUV idled nearby, more officials emerged, clearly monitoring the situation. Derek's colleagues arrived on the scene, cautious, unsure how to proceed. Their hesitation underscored just how serious this had become. They were witnessing the unraveling of one officer's career in real time. Steven finally placed the grocery bag on a nearby bench. He looked directly at Derek, speaking quietly, but every word resonated with authority and calm. The truth doesn't need force, respect doesn't need threats, and the law will always find its way. Derek flinched. He knew it was true. Every camera, every witness, every official was a reminder of the irreversible damage his arrogance had caused. His handcuffs were still clutched loosely in his hands, a symbol of his failed judgment. The neighbors continued to record, sharing footage, live streaming snippets, and whispering the growing story. By now, the news of the arrest of a famous actor being wrongfully detained at his own home was spreading faster than Derek could process. Steven's calm demeanor was the real power in the moment. He didn't need to shout or confront. His restraint amplified the officer's mistakes and magnified the public's outrage. Derek realized that no argument, no badge, no rank could undo the humiliation or the legal consequences heading his way. As the officials stepped forward, prepared to formally address the situation and ensure Steven's rights were fully protected, Derek's world seemed to shrink. Every witness, every camera, every recorded word would soon be part of the case, a permanent record of his misjudgment. In that moment, Derek understood the full scope of what he had done. His arrogance, his biases, and his refusal to see the truth had led to public humiliation, professional jeopardy, and a looming financial disaster that he could not avoid. And Steven? He remained silent, letting the unfolding consequences speak for themselves. The stage was set. Derek's actions would have repercussions far beyond embarrassment. A lesson about arrogance, bias, and the inevitability of justice. All unfolding in the quiet suburban street under the watchful eyes of neighbors, officials, and a man who had mastered the art of calm authority. The black SUV had come to a stop mere feet from the driveway, its engine idling like a low growl. From it stepped three figures, moving with precision and authority. Their expressions were unreadable but commanding, and each carried folders and electronic devices, signaling purpose. The neighbors on the street instinctively took a step back, realizing that this moment was about to escalate into something far bigger than they could imagine. One of the officials, a tall man in a dark suit, approached Officer Derek with a measured, almost cold expression. "Officer Derek," he said, voice firm, cutting through the tense hum of the street. "You have just detained the owner of this property without cause. You are in violation of multiple laws, and your actions will have consequences." Derek froze. His hand still hovered near the dangling handcuffs, a gesture of authority he no longer possessed. The papers in the official's hands were enough to make his stomach churn: property deeds, security contracts, legal documents, verifying ownership. Each page a bullet to his ego, each signature proof of the very truth he had refused to acknowledge. Steven Seagal remained calm, his eyes meeting Derek's with quiet certainty. He didn't need to say much. His presence alone made the cop feel smaller, weaker, and thoroughly exposed. "Officer," Steven said softly, but with undeniable authority, "everything he's saying is correct. I am the owner of this property, and your actions were entirely unnecessary." Derek's face turned red as anger, fear, and disbelief collided in his mind. I was just doing my job," he stammered, his voice shaky now, cracking under the weight of reality. The tall official shook his head. "You were doing your job according to your assumptions, Officer Derek, but assumptions are not authority. Ignorance of the law does not absolve you from consequences." At that moment, the other two officials stepped forward, one of them opening a large folder to reveal a tablet displaying a full body cam video. Derek's own squad camera had recorded everything, and now the footage was undeniable. Every biased word, every aggressive gesture, every arrogant command was captured in crystal clear evidence. The neighbors gasped, whispering furiously. He's showing him the tape. No way. This is going to ruin him. Unbelievable. I can't believe he handcuffed him at his own house. Derek's mind spun. His actions, meant to demonstrate authority, had been captured by multiple devices, recorded, and now verified by the very officials confronting him. He realized the enormity of the situation. This was no simple misunderstanding. This was a full-blown legal and financial disaster. Steven finally broke the silence, speaking with calm authority that seemed to ripple through the tension-choked air. Officer Derek, your actions were based on bias, not fact. You judged before you understood. You acted with arrogance instead of caution. And now, the consequences are unavoidable. The tall official stepped closer to Derek. Due to the unlawful detainment and discrimination, a lawsuit has been filed, and the department will be held financially responsible. The damages? $6.8 million. Derek's knees buckled slightly, a physical reaction to the crushing weight of reality. The papers, the tablet, the cameras, the murmuring crowd, all of it reflected back the gravity of his misjudgment. He had thought he was in control, but he had been blind to truth, legality, and power. One of the officials handed Steven a folder of documents confirming his ownership and rights, a symbolic gesture of the authority that had always been his but had been challenged that evening. Steven glanced down at the papers, then back at Derek. No anger, no vindictiveness, only a quiet certainty that the lesson had been delivered. The neighbors watched in awe, phones still recording, capturing what would soon become a story of viral proportions. Derek's arrogance, prejudice, and lack of awareness had led to this moment, a moment where power, patience, and calm authority prevailed. Steven's calm presence dominated the street. Even the officials seemed to defer to his quiet command, as though the years of discipline, focus, and life experience had imbued him with an authority no badge could challenge. Derek stood frozen, realizing in a gut-wrenching instant that he had underestimated the man in front of him. He had judged too quickly, acted too rashly, and now faced the consequences of both. The tension in the air slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of inevitability. Justice, long delayed by Derek's arrogance, had arrived, and it was absolute, undeniable, and public. The $6.8 million lawsuit, the legal accountability, and the humiliation of being wrong all crystallized in that single moment on the driveway. Steven finally spoke again, voice calm, deliberate, and resonant. This isn't about punishment, it's about accountability. It's about understanding that respect is earned, not assumed. And it's about learning that true authority comes from truth, not ego. The officials nodded. Derek's shoulders slumped. The lesson was clear. And the street, the neighbors, the phones, the recordings had witnessed it all. By the time the black SUV drove away, Steven Seagal had reclaimed not just his space, but the moral high ground. Officer Derek was left to confront the full reality of his mistake. A costly lesson in arrogance, bias, and the undeniable power of truth. The street was quieter now, though the tension still hung in the air like smoke. Derek stood frozen near the driveway, his face pale, hands trembling slightly as he tried to comprehend the full weight of what had just happened. Every neighbor, every phone camera, every whisper had recorded his failure in vivid detail. He had entered Steven Seagal's property as a man in control, confident, proud, and blinded by bias, and now he was exposed, humiliated, and facing consequences that no amount of ego could deflect. Steven, calm as ever, picked up the grocery bag he had set aside moments earlier. His demeanor never faltered. There was no gloating, no anger, only a quiet, commanding presence that radiated authority. He took a deep breath and looked at Derek, who could barely meet his gaze. "Officer Derek," Steven said softly, yet every word carried unmistakable weight. "You made a mistake, a costly mistake, and it's time to take responsibility for it." Derek swallowed hard. I didn't know. I thought." His voice cracked under the pressure. Every excuse he could muster felt meaningless against the undeniable proof surrounding him. The body cam footage, the legal documents, the presence of officials, it was all too clear. One of the officials stepped forward, handing Derek an envelope. "This contains the full documentation of the lawsuit. You will be held personally accountable for your actions as well as professionally. Your conduct violated department protocols and civil rights laws. The $6.8 million lawsuit will proceed against the department, and your testimony will be critical in determining your role in this incident." Derek's knees buckled slightly as he absorbed the reality. He had underestimated Steven Seagal. He had judged him before knowing him. And now, every arrogant gesture, every snap of his handcuffs, every biased assumption had culminated in a catastrophe he could not escape. Meanwhile, Steven turned his attention to the neighbors who had gathered, many still recording the aftermath. His voice, calm but firm, carried across the street. "This is why respect matters," he said. "Not just for those with power, not just for those who are famous or influential, but for every human being. Your actions, your judgments, your words, they have consequences. Always." One of the neighbors, emboldened by Steven's presence, asked, "Sir, what happens to him now?" Steven's eyes met Derek's again. "He will face consequences, yes. But the real lesson isn't punishment, it's accountability. It's about understanding that arrogance, bias, and prejudice lead to disaster. And it's about knowing that calm, thoughtful action and respect can prevent it." Derek shifted uncomfortably, aware that there was no way to argue or escape. He had learned painfully, publicly, the limits of his authority and the cost of acting without judgment or humility. He had tried to assert power through fear and intimidation, and in doing so, he had triggered a chain of events that would follow him for years. The officials began to escort Derek off the property, guiding him through the process of formal accountability. Steven didn't raise his voice, didn't command or threaten. His presence alone was enough. It was a quiet, unshakable authority, the kind that comes from a lifetime of discipline and experience. As Derek was led away, Steven addressed the neighbors one last time. "Let this be a reminder. True power is measured not by force, but by restraint. True respect is shown not when it's convenient, but when it's difficult. And humility, real humility, is the strongest force of all." The crowd murmured their agreement, phones still recording, realizing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Steven had not only defended his rights but had taught a subtle, unforgettable lesson to a man blinded by arrogance. By the time the officials and Derek had left, the quiet suburban street had been transformed. The incident would be talked about, shared online, and remembered not for the drama alone, but for the lesson embedded within it. Derek's misjudgment and arrogance contrasted sharply with Steven's calm authority, creating a story that would resonate far beyond that driveway. Steven finally stepped inside his home, closing the door gently behind him. He had defended his space, enforced accountability, and left a clear message. Respect is earned, actions have consequences, and calmness and integrity are far more powerful than aggression or bias. And in the quiet that remained, the neighbors realized that the man who had been wrongfully handcuffed had emerged victorious, not through force, but through patience, authority, and an unshakable understanding of what true power and respect mean. Derek, on the other hand, would carry the lesson with him forever. Arrogance and prejudice are costly, and every action, no matter how justified it seems in the moment, has consequences that cannot be ignored. The quiet suburban street finally settled into a calm it hadn't known all evening. The red and blue lights of the squad car had faded, and the black SUV had driven away. Derek was gone, escorted by officials who would now ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. The neighbors, still standing in small clusters, whispered among themselves, rewatching the footage on their phones and recounting every moment they had witnessed. Inside the house, Steven Seagal placed the last of his groceries on the counter. His calm demeanor had never wavered, not for a second. He had faced arrogance, prejudice, and unlawful aggression, yet he had not raised his voice, not reacted with anger. Instead, he had allowed truth, evidence, and patience to do the work. In the end, those qualities had ensured justice, not through force, but through quiet authority. As he looked out the window at the street below, Steven reflected on the evening's events. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Respect is not a currency to be earned from the famous or the wealthy. It is not something that should be measured by power, title, or ego. True respect is given before it is expected, extended even to those we think we can dominate, those we think we know. Arrogance blinds people to reality, and prejudice ensures that mistakes are not just likely, but inevitable. Derek, now a figure of public scrutiny, would learn this lesson the hard way. The lawsuit, amounting to $6.8 million, was not merely a punishment. It was a clear message to anyone who believed that badges, titles, or assumptions could replace humility and careful judgment. Every arrogant gesture, Every biased command, every rushed decision, had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. The very system he had sought to enforce had now turned against him, amplified by his own errors. Meanwhile, the neighbors continued to watch and talk about what had happened, realizing that they had witnessed more than a confrontation. They had seen a demonstration of quiet strength and calm authority. Steven's actions had taught them, in a subtle but unforgettable way, that composure, respect, and patience often carry far more power than aggression or force. The scene would be remembered not for the drama of the arrest, but for the lesson it carried, one that resonated far beyond the driveway where it had unfolded. Steven understood that lessons are most powerful when they are experienced firsthand. He had allowed Derek's arrogance to expose itself fully, and in doing so, had made the outcome inevitable. No shouting, no threats, no retaliation were needed. Just the simple, unwavering presence of truth and integrity. He finally turned away from the window, moving to sit in his living room. He knew the story of the evening would spread quickly, amplified by the neighbors' recordings and online sharing, and he knew that the lesson, the true moral, would resonate far beyond that quiet street. Respect, he whispered to himself, isn't conditional. It's a reflection of who you are, not who the other person is. Treat everyone with fairness, humility, and understanding, especially when no one is watching, and never let ego guide your actions, because arrogance always finds its way back to you. With that, Steven picked up his phone and typed a brief message to the security team and officials. Ensure Derek is held accountable, and make sure the property's legal standing is fully documented. Efficiency, clarity, and respect, these were the tools of true authority. Finally, he leaned back, letting the quiet of the evening settle around him. Outside, the neighbors continued to discuss the event, but their conversations had changed tone. Admiration for calm, patience, and wisdom had replaced shock and gossip. They understood now that power is not loud or forceful. It is measured, thoughtful, and grounded in respect. Steven smiled faintly, knowing the lesson would endure. The world had witnessed not just an arrest gone wrong, but a demonstration of what it means to remain composed, to act with integrity, and to hold one's ground with quiet confidence. The moral was clear. Arrogance and prejudice lead to downfall, while humility, patience, and respect lead to lasting authority. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the quiet street, Steven Seagal's presence remained a reminder. Respect is universal, consequences are inevitable, and true strength is silent but undeniable. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility is real strength. And tell me where you're watching from. Every kind soul deserves recognition.